Welcome, aloha. Thank you for joining us on ThinkTech Hawaii. Time for responsible change, and today we're going to talk about a broken criminal justice system, one of many broken systems. But since we're fix-it people, maybe that's a good thing, or maybe it's not. We're going to talk about who it works for, who it works against, and maybe things that might help shift that balance in a better direction. Fortunately, today we're happy to have here with us former Hawaii State Circuit Court Judge Sandra Sims, and brings a particular perspective, experience, and expertise to the criminal justice area, and has stayed active in a number of important reform areas. David Larson, immediate past chair of the American Bar Association section of dispute resolution, and a field that really has not gotten as extensively into the broken criminal justice system as far or as much as it might be optimal to do. And Tim Apicella, who brings a business perspective and a fellow ThinkTech host perspective to this. So Sandra, David, Tim, thanks so much for joining us. Where would you like to start? With what's broken or what's happening to fix it?
Define the problem.
There's a lot broken. We only have a half hour, Chuck.
Yeah, right.
How you gonna do? I think there's a lot broken. But there's a lot of stuff happening too. There's me, from my perspective, is generally I think we know enough about the problems and potential solutions, but there are people in our respective communities that are addressing some of these issues in their own, sometimes quiet ways, but they're still getting things done. And I like to focus on those folks.
And that's a really good point, Sandra, because you could make a virtually endless list of things that are broken, from excessive incarceration, a lack of rehabilitative training for reentry, the need for a completely reformed justice system as well as prison system, and many, many others. And resistance from elements in the community.
One thing Sandra was talking about, things that are happening now. I think that in recent times, within the last couple of years, there's been a recognition that maybe the appropriate people have not been responding to crises, and that, it isn't always a situation where we want to send armed police, that maybe we need people with different skills. So I think that that's a positive thing. The understanding that when troubling circumstances are occurring, that we need to think about who we're dispatching to respond to those circumstances. And I think we're doing some much better critical thinking about that. That being said, then we have to provide staffing for those positions, which is another question. Do we have the money? Do we have the people? But at least the recognition that maybe in the past we haven't always sent the right people, I think is a healthy thing.
No, that's a great insight, David, because as hopefully we've all recognized, in a conflict situation, if your first responders are armed forces, that may not be your best first option.
Yeah.
Tim, your thoughts?
I'd like to jump in on that because, I keep thinking back to the LA riots and Police Chief Gates, had all the finest weaponry, military style weaponry, style of, uniforms. The only problem is when you start to look like the military, you start to act like the military. And, I like to see maybe our law enforcement wear aloha wear now and then on the streets of Waikiki. But that's just me.
That's a thought. Yeah. I mean, that kind of scenario developed in St. Louis in the previous rise. That's when they brought in all that military equipment. It just sort of kept escalating things. So each night it got worse because you got bigger trucks coming in. So I guess the good point is the militarization of police departments has kind of, much to David's point as well, kind of added to the tension. But we're starting to maybe take a look at doing some things differently, like David has pointed out, and making a better response sometimes, not always, still not there yet, as to who's going to be responding to these situations and in what manner they're going to respond. I mean, what COVID has showed us is we got a whole lot of people with mental health issues that we have just not addressed at all. And they've been locked up in their homes or wherever they were for the last couple of years, and they're coming out and whoa.
Yeah, that idea of sending the appropriate people, another positive of that is that sometimes people won't even call law enforcement because they're afraid they're going to get kind of the one kind of response, and they're afraid of that kind of response, and for a variety of reasons. And if you're in an underrepresented population, you may be even more afraid of what that response will be. So you don't call at all, and then the situation continues to spiral out of control. So, another positive to assigning the right people to come is that people will be more willing to call for help because that fear factor might go away, at least might be diminished.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
And this brings out that it really puts law enforcement leadership in all areas in really, really difficult positions. They may not have the resources, either financially or the human resources. They may not have the support. They may be lacking a lot of what they need to be able to respond appropriately to conflict situations that threaten violence, but need not necessarily be the best to respond to with violence.
Mm-hmm.
And understaffing right now is a huge problem. I know up here in the Twin Cities, we're down well over 100 officers in Minneapolis alone. So when it comes to allocations and assignments, it's difficult. We've had a lot of problems on light rail, for instance. And our light rail system is an honor system. Anybody can get on and walk on. You're supposed to pay. Do you always pay? Well, people aren't always paying, and it's become a haven now for a lot of home. I mean, we were talking earlier before the program about Minnesota weather. It's been a very harsh winter. So one place you can seek a refuge from that winter is on the light rail. So people are just coming on the light rail and kind of making that their home. And been a lot of open drug use and a lot of problems. And because of the short staffing, those problems have not been addressed. So another current problem is staffing. And again, in the Twin Cities, we had the murder of George Floyd and some appropriate negative criticism of what was going on with the police force. Well, for a lot of people who might be considering a law enforcement career, they're saying, I don't want any part of it. Yeah, not me.
Yeah.
And it's like our parents telling their high school graduates, and their college graduates is, this is where you should go. This is where you should take your life. And they aren't saying that. And parents are not encouraging their kids, and people are making those choices themselves.
I've thought about that as we think about what's going to happen in the future in terms of people going into things like law enforcement, even the military. There's this fear, not a fear, but there's just not a willingness or an interest or desire to among many and a lot of parents to have their kids go into those kind of fields. So and teaching as well. Now that we're mentioning it, teaching as well. So we got to figure out some things to address that as well. That's a tough one.
Go ahead.
Well, I grew up with a lot of police chiefs in the Pacific Northwest area of Washington State, Seattle area. And one of my dear friends that I grew up with recently retired in the last couple of years as a police chief. And he said, it's the fear that you're going to be a police officer on the streets, but you also have to be trained almost as an attorney. and really watch everything, you know, that's said and done. And to a certain degree, that's true. But yet we need that that ability that our police officers are cognizant of the law that they enforce, but also the ramifications by enforcing it in a poor or, you know, incorrect manner. So it's you know, it's a double-edged sword as far as recruitment and retainment.
Yeah, and also addressing you know, the mental health crises. You just don't know what kind of situation you're walking into. And as you both have pointed out, just the use of the force to do it is not going to always be the right response when you're dealing with someone who may be, you know, on drugs or particularly in a mental health breakdown kind of situation. And we've seen some of that around the country, and even here in Honolulu, we've had some situations where clearly there was something else going on, and the response was the force, and the force escalates, and we miss out on. And not that they got to be trained to be, you know, psychiatrists and social workers, but there's still that element of some of that training has to take place. I know Maui at one point a few years back was kind of on the somewhat of a cutting edge in addressing those issues by having their officers, you know, trained to respond, sort of a first responder to potentially identifying a mental health crisis as well. And I don't know I'm not sure if they're still doing that, but they were certainly doing it for a while and were doing it well enough that they were being called upon to assist other departments in addressing it, you know, and learning those responses.
Yeah. You know, it's just a shame that how language kind of shapes our thinking. And if you recall, the term defund the police kind of won the political star of the day, and the term stuck. You know, maybe it would have been better if it was supplement the police and supplement them with mental health counselors and, you know, things of that nature. But unfortunately, language, once it takes hold, it defines the playing ground.
And people don't think about the implication. They just, you know, you just go by the soundbite. And I think, and even in those that espouse that position of defunding, what they were really talking about is shifting some of the resource to some of these other issues that police departments have to learn to address. And it wasn't about taking. Well, I'm not the one to to speak for all, but I think, and like you said, the term got hijacked into meaning, you know, let's not have police, and that's not at all what, you know, the communities are asking, that we don't have it at all. We just want to have a way in which we respond to situations that helps us to de-escalate potential violence and those kinds of, you know, increased confrontation. So I don't know, just.
Well, you know, in terms of improving the police, one thing that I think also is improving is that there are efforts to improve diversification and recruitment. And then this year in the Twin Cities, the legislature devoted $400,000 to a Pathways to Policing program that will provide reimbursement for wages and salaries and training and tuition and books for people that want to get law enforcement degrees. But the focus being, we would like to change the face of our police department, make it look a little bit more like the people that are being policed. That goes not just for race and color, but also for gender. The number of women in police forces is quite low, in many places, single digits. And even worse, when you go up into the bureaucracy, into leadership positions, very small percentage, maybe 3% nationally. So another thing police forces are thinking about in terms of improving the delivery of the service they provide is that maybe if we change our demographics, change the face of our force, maybe it'll be better received, maybe it'll be more attentive to the cultures and communities, and maybe we can do a better job.
Hopefully.
You know, I think it kind of goes almost hand in hand with what you just said, David, is the visibility of police. And, you know, the old concept of community policing that's on foot versus a patrol car, your visibility of your diversity that you've retained or you've hired and trying to retain is so much better if you're, you know, actually on foot. But, you're dealing with environmental factors, heat, cold, rain, snow. It's tough to be a cop on the beat. And but there lies the dilemma.
Yeah. Of course,
Oh,
we don't
well-
have that quite the issue of, the snow and sleet and being on the beat in Waikiki or so, but still, it's still tough. I don't. It's a tough job, regardless. It's
Yeah,
a tough job. We've got to find ways to. I mean, our police force obviously is, inherently diverse because kind of has to be, but that alone is not going to always be enough when you don't have that sort of training and focus on addressing some of these other means to respond, and that's an important piece. Yeah.
I don't know if I ever lived this experience, but it certainly was in movies that I watched, where you had a neighborhood officer who was always in that neighborhood, got to know the neighborhood, neighborhood got to know that officer. There was a very different personal relationship there than I think we have in most circumstances today. I don't know if a lot of communities have that kind of relationship.
Officer friendly. It's called.
Yeah.
That's what he was.
Yeah.
Showing my age. Actually, I grew up in Chicago's, South Side. It was Chicago segregated. It was a Black community, but it was, people knew each other, and there weren't a lot of Black police officers, but there was enough of a community presence of, people who were concerned about what we children were doing, that there was that sort of inherent policing where the most severe threat you could make to a child was, I'm going to call your mother. Does your mother know you're here? It's like, don't do that, please. No, not my mother. No, but I'm just being facetious. But there was something about that because you had this community, that sense of community. And that, in many ways, is as big a deterrent to violence, to criminal behavior as having, these, enhanced police departments. That sense of community where everybody feels connected and a part of that. That's a critical piece, I think, that we've kind of lost a lot.
Well, COVID certainly contributed to that.
Oh God, yes.
We didn't go outside. We didn't meet in the common places we're used to meet. We didn't meet on the street. We were all staying inside. If we saw someone, we stayed a distance away from them because we didn't know if they were infected. So I think they contributed to the dissolution of community.
Absolutely. And like I said, when people are coming out and they've been in this isolation, they're just, they got all kinds of issues to deal with as well. I mean, you have some sort of spark that, gets things going in the wrong direction, and there we are. I do want to share a positive thing about, this isn't police, but it's about our incarceration. I attended a recent event. I'm part of that Women's Prison Project, where Chuck and I have talked about this before, where it's directed at looking at programs for women who are incarcerated. And just recently, there was a tremendous effort put on by our former governor, Linda Lingle, actually, to bringing together these great folks to push for these changes. And there was a housing project that was provided by the city, in partnership with others at Maholamai. It's a residential building that was converted to house women who are being recently released from prison, and are housed there as they began to make the adjustment back into life. It's got all kinds of resources available to it. Working with all the different city departments and state agencies and grants from private groups that were a part of it. It was quite an amazing event. It was quite amazing. The building is very, very nice. And so she was able to bring together, city, state. Of course, she was a former governor. I guess you could call people and they will say, Yes, you need that ability too. But it was quite a positive experience, and it really bodes well for the future, at least in terms of what we're doing with women who are incarcerated. And it's hard to overlook the impact of having women incarcerated, because their incarceration and their issues and their trauma affects a bigger segment of the community than anyone. It's because most of them, in fact, all of them at women's correctional facility had children. And so you have that ripple effect of, children who are away from a parent and who are already in a situation of trauma because of that. And you need to be able to address all of those situations. So that was important.
Yeah, that focus on moving away from punitiveness to support.
Yes.
Somebody comes out of prison and you give them give them their personal items back and say, good luck. And we get recidivism. The whole idea that if anybody coming out of prison probably needs somebody to hold their hand and give them some support to get reintegrated.
Absolutely.
So if we really want to prevent crime, maybe you want to make sure we support people when they come out to make sure they don't lapse back. So what Sandra's describing, I think, is wonderful, and that's exactly the kind of thing we need.
Absolutely, it was quite inspiring, I'll tell you. And they had.
I'd like to see some employment reform as far as to what degree or to what crimes or convictions or sentences served that are scrubbed from your background check. That is the greatest deterrent to getting ahead, is finding a decent job that my background or my conviction is preventing me from performing.
Absolutely.
And I just think we're way behind on that one. And don't get me wrong, I think there are some crimes that employers and the community need to know about, but there's so many more that they don't need to know about, and I'd like to see some reform in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there is legislation being passed, and it's slowly growing. It's called ban the box legislation, where it's the application form, and you got to check ever been arrested, ever been convicted, to say that you can't have that. And what you might be able to do, if you've got a conviction for a violent crime, such as murder in the last 7 years, you might be able to ask that kind of question. So not necessarily elimination of all questions, as Tim is saying. There might be some things we still want to know about, but to be very discreet about what people are able to ask, and don't make it just a generic checkbox that then takes somebody off the employment rolls.
Exactly. And the other issue was also having, one of the things that came up was when you're releasing someone, like you said, with the bag of stuff you brought in, and you don't have like an ID, or particularly a state ID or driver's license or something that identifies you, you can't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you can't vote.
One of the other pieces, huh?
I was going to say, and you can't vote. And you want people to feel like they're back to life and being part of the community. And
so there was another piece of legislation that was kind of looking at making certain that one of the pieces that we do is make certain that people have an ID. And this is not just for women, but for men who are inmates who are being released, make certain they have ID or access to get an ID immediately upon their release, so they can at least begin the process of finding their way back into society. I think there's something to be said, Tim. You raised a good point about having some focus on being more being more selective about the notion that a person has a criminal background determining whether or not they should be employed or not. I mean, not everything means that you can't work. I think that's a biggie.
Well, and those are important things to understand, because a good friend who's actually a very respected mediator in the LA area started a program pro bono years ago, which basically got people together, volunteers, to work with people in prisons on building up communications, attitudes, and behaviors, just to build relationships. it's what we all do in our lives. It's the key to the opportunities and the choices that we have. Why would it not be for people whose choices and opportunities are far more limited and restricted?
Mm-hmm.
Exactly as you said, in all areas, housing, employment, education, healthcare, everywhere they go, it's going to be a restriction, an obstacle, a deterrent. And the attitude they come out with because of that is going to impact that.
And that may be the more important thing to address, among the more important things to address, is because we're in this place now where there is such, I guess, division on, your criminals versus non-criminals, and we're prepared to just lump everybody into one category. Whereas I think from my experience, I still hold to the belief that much of crime that's committed is situational, aside from the trauma and the drugs. It's people make wrong decisions in those moments. They're affected by other things. And of course, people who are victimized by this, that's not to minimize what happens to them, because that's an important consideration as well. I think we can't ignore that. But I think we have to get to a place of where we're kind of doing some balancing and understanding that, the person who is, convicted of violent assault or murder or distributing, dangerous drugs or trafficking is in a different category than that person who may have just, lost their job, been traumatized by something, and just in a moment does something that they would not ordinarily do that happens to be a crime. And we can't just keep lumping them all together. I mean, honestly, there are some folks who just basically need to be incarcerated.
One of the
long periods of time. I mean, let's just be honest. That does exist. That, when we're talking about all these reforms, we're not suggesting that everybody needs to, walk out, and some need to be there and need to stay and don't ever need to come out. And we know who they are, but that's not everybody. And it's actually a relatively small percentage of those who are incarcerated.
One other thing I wanted to mention as you're closing out here is that another area where I think that we've had real problems, but things are improving, is in terms of accountability. And Tim mentioned this a little earlier. I think in particular that a lot of progressive discipline systems in law enforcement agencies have culminated in arbitration, and those arbitration proceedings have been confidential. The arbitrators have been typically just recycled and recycled. There have been a number of sheriffs who have been tremendously frustrated that when they've tried to impose discipline, it goes to arbitration and they immediately get reinstated. So I think that one good thing that's happening is that people are looking hard at those arbitration systems and trying to make them a little more transparent, trying to make the pool of arbitrators larger, to make it more diverse, and kind of open up that end of it.
Yeah. That's another one too. Yeah. Because the public doesn't trust. They don't trust that if they bring something, there's going to be any accountability, anything, happening with it. At least no one knows what they're doing, and we don't expect that they're going to address it.
That's a great thought. Okay. Any last thoughts, Tim?
Yeah. I didn't mention it, but I'd really love to see more parity of financial resources dedicated between the prosecution side of the equation versus the public defender side of the equation. And I know public defenders are horribly overtaxed and overworked. And there's a part of me that says resources need to be dedicated to ensure that everyone gets the proper representation and, most importantly, the time for representation. And so that's an area I'd like to see a little more parity applied.
Well, and that's a good point.
Yeah, that's a very tough one. It's all about financial resources.
Yeah. And the public perception is that we don't want to, there's still that notion out there that we don't want to, we don't want to pay for the lawyers that are representing, quote, criminals. There's still that. There's a lot of that.
There's a lot of that, and I won't say it's cruel, but it's cruel.
Yeah, it is. It is. It is. It is. I think, yeah, you don't have to explain it. It is wrong.
Yeah.
David, any last thoughts?
Yeah, like, I think there is a sentiment and a recognition that we need to think even harder about the roots of crime, and less about punishment. And I'm encouraged a little bit as our technology continues to improve. That one thing I don't think we've been as good at as we may have been is trying to correlate the social experiments and policies that we've implemented with results. I don't think we've done as good a job as we could have, and I think that then makes those programs subject to attack and criticism. People say, well, let's stop because you can't prove what you did. And I think that maybe with new technology and data tracking and things like that, if we're creative about how we use the technology, maybe we can do a better job of both designing those programs and proving that they work.
Excellent.
Great thoughts. Thank you all so much. We're out of time for today, but just to leave everyone with a thought coming from this, and listening to you all, it came to mind, wouldn't it be wonderful if somehow we could reform and engineer our criminal justice system and the society's connection with it in a way that enabled people to come out of it with the confidence that they could relate harmoniously with people. They knew how to do job interviews and scholarship application interviews to go back to school, housing interviews to get a place to live, all of those things. And that people in the society would be able to make attitudinal shifts to be able to welcome those opportunities, say, yeah, I'll meet you halfway on that.
Yeah. Yeah.
What a thought, huh? Thank you all so much.
It can happen.
ThinkTech Hawaii, Sandra Sims, David Larson, Tim Apicella. Thanks for your thoughts, perspectives, and insights. Come back and join us. We'll be back in a couple of weeks.
Thank you so much for watching ThinkTech Hawaii. If you like what we do, please like us and click the subscribe button on YouTube and the follow button on Vimeo. You can also follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn, and donate to us at thinktechhawaii.com. Mahalo.